The lights flickered, casting eerie shadows over the empty party tables, and for the first time, Mark felt like they weren't alone in the restaurant. The animatronic Chuck E. turned its head, slowly, unnaturally, its mechanical jaw creaking as it whispered, "The party never ends." A child's laughter echoed through the darkened play area, but there were no other children left inside. The doors wouldn't budge, the windows wouldn't break, and the only thing moving was the lifeless stare of the animatronics as they began to twitch to life. Something skittered in the shadows behind the stage, and when Mark turned to look, he saw a pair of glowing red eyes staring right back at him. It was a sweltering summer afternoon when the invitation arrived. The sun hung high in the sky, casting long shadows over the quiet suburban neighborhood. Emily, a bright-eyed 8-year-old with a penchant for adventure, found the envelope slipped under the front door. Her name was scrawled in glittery, childlike handwriting. "Mom, Dad, look what I found," she exclaimed, waving the envelope excitedly. Her mother, Karen, looked up from her book, adjusting her reading glasses. "What is it, sweetie?" Emily tore open the envelope, revealing a colorful card adorned with cartoonish characters. At the center was the unmistakable image of Chuck E. Cheese, the iconic mouse mascot. The card read, "You're invited to a birthday party. Join us for fun, games, and pizza at Chuck E. Cheese's." Date, July 15th. Time, 3 p.m. RSVP, 555-1234. Karen's brow furrowed. "Do you know who this is from?" Emily shook her head. "There's no name. But it's Chuck E. Cheese. Can we go, please?" Her father, Mark, joined them, glancing at the invitation. "It's odd there's no sender. Maybe it's from one of your classmates." After a brief discussion, they decided it was harmless. Emily had been talking about visiting Chuck E. Cheese's for weeks, and this seemed like the perfect opportunity. Karen called the RSVP number, but it went straight to voicemail. Assuming it was a simple oversight, they planned to attend. The days leading up to the party were filled with anticipation. Emily could hardly contain her excitement, chattering endlessly about the games she'd play and the pizza she'd eat. On the day of the party, she dressed in her favorite outfit, a bright yellow sundress, and eagerly waited by the door. As they arrived at the Chuck E. Cheese's location, the parking lot seemed unusually empty for a Saturday afternoon. The familiar neon sign flickered slightly, casting an eerie glow over the entrance. "Maybe we're early," Mark suggested, though a glance at his watch showed they were right on time. They stepped inside, greeted by the familiar scent of pizza and the cacophony of arcade games. However, the usual bustling crowd was absent. A lone employee stood behind the prize counter, his back turned. "Excuse me," Karen called out. The employee turned slowly, revealing a pale, expressionless face. "Welcome to Chuck E. Cheese's," he said in a monotone voice. "How can I assist you?" "We're here for a birthday party," Mark explained, showing the invitation. The employee's eyes flicked to the card, then back to them. "Right this way," he said, motioning towards the party area. As they followed him, Emily clutched her mother's hand tightly. The usual cheerful atmosphere felt off, the animatronic characters on stage frozen in unnatural poses. They reached a table set up with party decorations, but no other guests were in sight. A cake sat in the center, candles unlit. "Where is everyone?" Karen asked, her unease growing. "They'll be here shortly," the employee replied, his gaze lingering on Emily. "Please, make yourselves comfortable." Minutes passed, feeling like hours. The silence was punctuated only by the occasional whirring of the animatronics. Emily fidgeted in her seat, her earlier excitement waning. Suddenly, the lights dimmed, and the stage curtains rustled. The animatronics sprang to life, their movements jerky and uncoordinated. Chuck E. Cheese's voice crackled through the speakers. "Welcome, Emily. We've been waiting for you." Emily's eyes widened. "How do they know my name?" Karen and Mark exchanged worried glances. "This doesn't feel right," Mark muttered. Before they could react, the exit doors slammed shut, and the room plunged into darkness. The only illumination came from the glowing eyes of the animatronics, now fixed intently on the family. A low, mechanical laugh echoed through the room. "The party's just beginning." Panic set in as they realized they were trapped, the once whimsical restaurant transforming into a sinister playground. Unbeknownst to them, this was no ordinary birthday party. The invitation had been a lure, drawing them into a carefully orchestrated nightmare. And the true host was about to reveal itself. The oppressive darkness enveloped the family, broken only by the sinister glow of the animatronic's eyes. Emily's grip tightened on her mother's hand as mechanical laughter echoed through the room. "Welcome to the party, Chuck E. Cheese's voice crackled from the speakers, dripping with malice. Mark's heart pounded in his chest. "We need to find a way out," he whispered urgently. Suddenly, the animatronics began to move, their joints creaking ominously. Chuck E. Cheese stepped off the stage, his movements unnaturally fluid for a machine. The other characters, Jasper T. Jowls, Helen Henny, Mr. Munch, and Pasquale, followed suit, encircling the family. "You can't leave," Chuck E. hissed, his once friendly face now twisted into a grotesque grin. "The party's just begun." Karen shielded Emily, her voice trembling. "What do you want from us?" "To play," Helen Henny replied, her beak snapping with each word. "Forever." Without warning, the animatronics lunged. Mark grabbed a chair, swinging it at Jasper T. Jowls, who emitted a distorted growl as he staggered back. Karen pulled Emily towards the arcade area, hoping to find an exit. The games flickered to life as they entered, casting eerie shadows. The sounds of digital beeps and chimes created a disorienting cacophony. Emily spotted a door marked, "Employees Only." "Mom, there," she pointed. They raced to the door, flinging it open to reveal a dimly lit corridor. The walls were lined with old posters of the animatronic band, their eyes seeming to follow them. Mark caught up, breathless. "We need to keep moving." As they hurried down the hallway, a chilling voice echoed behind them. "You can't hide from us." They reached a staircase leading down. With no other options, they descended into the bowels of the building. The air grew colder, and the faint hum of machinery vibrated through the walls. At the bottom, they found themselves in a large, dimly lit room filled with disassembled animatronic parts. The sight was macabre, lifeless eyes, detached limbs, and severed torsos strewn about haphazardly. "What is this place?" Karen whispered. Horrified, Mark examined a nearby workbench cluttered with tools and schematics. "It looks like a maintenance area." Emily wandered to a corner where a dusty, old animatronic stood covered by a tattered sheet. Curiosity piqued, she lifted the fabric, revealing a figure unlike the others. It was an animatronic of a young girl, her face eerily lifelike, with a vacant stare that sent shivers down Emily's spine. "Mom, Dad, look at this," she called out. Karen and Mark approached, their expressions grim. "Why would they build something like this?" Karen asked, her voice shaking. Before Mark could answer, the animatronic girl's eyes flickered to life, and a haunting melody began to play from within her chest. Her mouth moved mechanically as she sang. "Come play with me, in the dark we'll be, forever friends, for eternity." Emily stumbled back, terrified. The room's temperature seemed to drop further as the song continued, the animatronic stepping forward with jerky movements. "We need to get out of here," Mark urged, pulling his family towards another door on the opposite side of the room. They burst through, finding themselves in a narrow passageway. The walls were lined with old arcade machines, their screens cracked and faces frozen in eternal game overs. As they navigated the labyrinthine corridors, the mechanical footsteps of the animatronics echoed behind them, growing closer with each passing second. "This way," Mark shouted, spotting a faint light ahead. They sprinted towards it, emerging into a vast storage room filled with unopened boxes and discarded costumes. In the center stood a large control panel, its screens displaying various areas of the restaurant. "Maybe we can find a way to stop them," Karen suggested, rushing to the panel. Mark examined the controls, his fingers flying over buttons and switches. Suddenly, the monitors flickered, revealing live feeds of the animatronics searching the building. "There," he pointed to a screen showing the main stage. "If we can get back there, maybe we can shut them down." "But how do we get past them?" Karen asked, fear evident in her eyes. Emily tugged at her father's sleeve. "Dad, look." She pointed to a row of old animatronic costumes hanging on a rack. Mark's eyes widened with realization. "We can use these to blend in." They quickly donned the costumes, the musty fabric clinging to their skin. With their identities concealed, they cautiously made their way back through the corridors, mimicking the stiff movements of the animatronics. As they approached the main stage, they saw Chuck E. Cheese. As they approached the main stage area, the once vibrant and cheerful ambience of the restaurant had transformed into a sinister tableau. The stage lights flickered intermittently, casting grotesque shadows of the animatronic figures that stood motionless, their eyes gleaming with an unnatural light. The air was thick with the scent of old pizza and a metallic tang that hinted at something more ominous. Disguised in the musty animatronic costumes, the family moved cautiously through the dimly lit corridors of the Chuck E. Cheese establishment. The oppressive silence was occasionally broken by distant mechanical whirs and the faint echoes of eerie children's laughter. Each step they took was measured, their senses heightened, aware that any misstep could alert the malevolent animatronics to their presence. Mark gestured towards the control panel situated at the side of the stage. "If we can access that panel, we might be able to shut them down," he whispered, his voice muffled by the oversized head of the costume. Karen nodded, clutching Emily's hand tightly. "Stay close, and no matter what happens, don't remove your costume," she instructed, her eyes reflecting both determination and fear. They inched their way towards the control panel, their movements synchronized to mimic the jerky motions of the animatronics. As they drew nearer, the sound of mechanical footsteps resonated from an adjacent hallway. The family froze, their breaths shallow, as the towering figure of Chuck E. Cheese emerged, his once friendly demeanor now twisted into a malevolent grin. Chuck E.'s eyes scanned the room, pausing momentarily on the disguised family. A chilling silence ensued before he continued his patrol, disappearing into another corridor. The family exhaled collectively, the tension momentarily alleviated. Reaching the control panel, Mark examined the array of switches and buttons, many labeled with cryptic abbreviations. "I need to find the master shutdown switch," he murmured, his fingers hovering over the controls. Emily's eyes darted around nervously, the oppressive atmosphere weighing heavily on her young psyche. "Daddy, hurry," she urged, her voice trembling. As Mark deliberated over the controls, a sudden, high-pitched giggle echoed through the room. The family turned to see the animatronic figure of Helen Henny spring to life, her eyes glowing with a sinister intensity. "Intruders detected," Helen's voice crooned, a disturbing blend of sweetness and menace. Panic surged through the family as the other animatronics began to activate, their mechanical limbs whirring and clanking. Mark's hands trembled as he frantically searched for the shutdown switch. Come on," he muttered, sweat trickling down his brow. Suddenly, the room was bathed in a pulsating red light, and an alarm blared, its deafening wail reverberating through the building. The animatronics advanced, their movements synchronized, eyes fixed on the family. In a desperate bid, Mark flipped a series of switches, and the alarm ceased. The animatronics halted abruptly, their heads tilting in unison as if processing the sudden change. "What did you do?" Karen asked, her voice edged with both hope and fear. I think I activated a reset sequence," Mark replied, his eyes fixed on the now motionless figures. The respite was short-lived. A low, rumbling noise emanated from beneath the floor, and the ground trembled. The stage split open, revealing a hidden staircase descending into darkness. A putrid odor wafted up, assaulting their senses. Emily recoiled, covering her nose. "What is that smell?" Mark peered into the abyss, his expression grim. "I don't know, but it might be our only way out." Karen hesitated, glancing at the frozen animatronics. "What if they reactivate?" "We can't stay here," Mark insisted. "We have to keep moving." With trepidation, the family descended the staircase, the darkness swallowing them with each step. The air grew colder, and the walls, slick with moisture, seemed to close in around them. At the bottom, they entered a cavernous chamber illuminated by the sickly glow of fluorescent lights. The walls were lined with rows of decommissioned animatronics, their lifeless eyes staring blankly ahead. Workbenches cluttered with tools and disassembled parts indicated that this was a maintenance and storage area. "This must be where they repair and store the old models," Mark observed, his voice echoing softly. Emily wandered towards a corner where a particularly large animatronic lay covered by a dusty tarp. Curiosity piqued, she reached out to unveil it. "Emily, don't," Karen warned, but it was too late. As the tarp fell away, it revealed a grotesque amalgamation of various animatronic parts fused together, forming a nightmarish figure. Its eyes snapped open, emitting a piercing red light. "Intruders detected," it bellowed in a deep, distorted voice. The chamber came alive with the sound of whirring motors and clanking metal as the decommissioned animatronics began to awaken, their movements erratic and unnatural. The chamber erupted into chaos as the decommissioned animatronics sprang to life, their malfunctioning joints emitting grating screeches. The grotesque amalgamation, towering over the rest, fixed its piercing red gaze on the family, its voice a guttural growl. "Intruders will be assimilated." Mark's heart raced as he scanned the room for an escape. "This way," he shouted, leading Karen and Emily towards a narrow passage partially concealed behind a stack of crates. They squeezed through the gap, the sounds of clanking metal and distorted voices echoing behind them. The passage led to a dimly lit hallway, the walls lined with faded posters of cheerful children celebrating with the animatronic band, a stark contrast to their current predicament. As they hurried down the corridor, Emily tugged at Karen's sleeve. "Mom, look!" She pointed to a door labeled, "Control Room." Mark tried the handle, it was unlocked. They slipped inside and bolted the door behind them. The room was filled with monitors displaying various areas of the facility, some showing static, others revealing the roaming animatronics searching for them. A large control panel dominated one wall, covered in switches, buttons, and levers, many labeled with cryptic abbreviations. Karen approached the panel, her eyes scanning the controls. There has to be a way to shut them down from here. Mark nodded, his fingers hovering over the switches. If we can deactivate the main power source, it might stop them. Emily's gaze was drawn to a dusty binder resting on a nearby shelf labeled, Emergency Protocols. She opened it, flipping through pages of technical diagrams and instructions. "Dad, here," she exclaimed, pointing to a section titled, Master Shutdown Sequence. Mark studied the instructions, his brow furrowing. "It looks like we need to input a specific code to initiate the shutdown." Karen glanced at the monitors, her face paling as she saw the animatronics converging towards their location. "We don't have much time." Mark's hands trembled as he began entering the code. Each beep of the console seemed to echo louder, amplifying the tension. Suddenly, a loud bang reverberated through the room as the door shuddered under the force of a heavy blow. The animatronics had found them. "Hurry, Mark," Karen urged, her voice edged with panic. With a final keystroke, Mark completed the sequence. The monitors flickered, and a synthesized voice announced, "Master shutdown initiated." The pounding on the door ceased, and the screens displayed the animatronics freezing in place, their eyes dimming to darkness. The family exhaled in unison, the oppressive weight of fear momentarily lifting. "Is it over?" Emily asked, her voice small. Mark nodded, pulling her into a tight embrace. "I think so, sweetheart." Karen approached the control panel, her eyes narrowing as she noticed a flashing indicator labeled, Basement Access. "What do you suppose is down there?" Mark followed her gaze, his expression hardening. "Only one way to find out." They exited the control room cautiously, the once menacing animatronics now lifeless husks. Retracing their steps, they found a stairwell leading further into the depths of the facility. The descent was steep, the air growing colder with each step. At the bottom, they encountered a heavy metal door slightly ajar, a faint light seeping through the crack. Pushing it open, they entered a vast underground chamber filled with rows of glass cylinders, each containing a humanoid figure suspended in a viscous fluid. The figures bore an unsettling resemblance to the animatronics above, but with disturbingly human features. Emily clung to Karen, her eyes wide with horror. "What is this place?" Mark approached one of the cylinders, his stomach churning as he realized the truth. They're organic. Part machine, part human." Karen covered her mouth, her eyes welling with tears. How could they do this? A series of documents on a nearby desk caught Mark's attention. He skimmed through them, his face growing pale. They were experimenting with merging human tissue and animatronic components to create more lifelike entertainment, but something went wrong. A low hum filled the chamber as the lights flickered. The fluid in the cylinders began to bubble, and the figure's eyes snapped open, revealing a hauntingly familiar red glow. "We need to get out of here, now," Mark shouted, grabbing Karen and Emily's hands. They sprinted back towards the stairwell, the sound of shattering glass and mechanical screeches echoing behind them. As they ascended, the facility trembled, the experiments awakening to their newfound consciousness. Bursting through the exit, they found themselves in the main dining area, the first light of dawn filtering through the windows. The once terrifying animatronics now stood as inert statues, overshadowed by the horrors lurking below. Mark led his family to the main entrance, his hands shaking as he fumbled with the locks. With a final heave, the doors swung open, and they stumbled into the cool morning air, the nightmare finally behind them. The cool morning air enveloped the family as they stumbled out of the Chuck E. Cheese establishment, the rising sun casting a gentle glow over the parking lot. The once vibrant and inviting facade of the restaurant now stood as a grim reminder of the harrowing ordeal they had just endured. Mark, his breath heavy and uneven, turned to his wife and daughter, ensuring they were unharmed. Karen's face was pale, her eyes wide with lingering fear, while Emily clung to her mother's side, her small frame trembling. "We need to call the authorities," Mark stated, his voice resolute despite the exhaustion that weighed upon him. Karen nodded, fumbling for her phone with shaky hands. As she dialed, Mark surveyed the area, half expecting the animatronic horrors to burst through the doors in pursuit. But the building remained eerily silent, its darkened windows concealing the monstrosities within. Minutes later, the distant wail of sirens grew louder, and a convoy of police cars and emergency vehicles descended upon the scene. Officers emerged, their expressions a mix of confusion and concern as they approached the disheveled family. "Are you folks all right?" one officer inquired, his gaze shifting between the three. Mark nodded. "We're okay now, but there's something terribly wrong inside that place." As they recounted their nightmarish experience, the officers exchanged skeptical glances. The tale of malevolent animatronics and clandestine experiments seemed too fantastical to be true. "We'll need to investigate the premises," the lead officer declared, signaling his team to advance. The family watched as the officers entered the building, their flashlights cutting through the dim interior. Time seemed to stretch interminably as they awaited the return of the authorities. Finally, the officers re-emerged, their faces etched with bewilderment. "We found something," the lead officer admitted, his earlier skepticism replaced by unease. "But it's best if you come with us to the station. We need detailed statements, and you all should get checked out by medical professionals." As they were escorted away, Emily glanced back at the Chuck E. Cheese building, its cheerful exterior belying the horrors concealed within. A shiver ran down her spine, and she tightened her grip on her mother's hand. In the weeks that followed, the incident at Chuck E. Cheese became a media sensation. News outlets clamored for details, and conspiracy theories ran rampant. The establishment was cordoned off, with investigators and scientists delving into the mysteries that lay beneath. Reports surfaced of unethical experiments aimed at creating hyperrealistic animatronics through the fusion of human and machine. The public was outraged, demanding accountability and justice for the atrocities committed. For the family, life would never be the same. The traumatic events left indelible scars, both physical and psychological. They attended therapy sessions, striving to rebuild a sense of normalcy, but the shadows of that night loomed large. Emily, once a vibrant and carefree child, became withdrawn, plagued by nightmares of mechanical monsters lurking in the dark. Mark and Karen grappled with guilt and helplessness, their hearts heavy with the knowledge that a simple birthday celebration had nearly cost them everything. As the world moved on, the family remained ensnared by the haunting memories of that fateful night at Chuck E. Cheese, a chilling reminder of the darkness that can lurk beneath the veneer of innocent fun.